They called it a surprise spa vacation. A gift, they said, for all the years I had taken care of everyone else. I smiled. I thanked them. I packed my bags with the naive joy of a mother seeing her children's sudden thoughtfulness. But as the manicured lawns of the resort came into view, a different name etched on the imposing gates sent ice through my veins. Golden Years Senior Living. This wasn't a spa. This was a cage. And my own children held the key. I want to tell you how it happened, how the people I loved most planned the perfect betrayal. If you're listening to this story, thank you so much for being here. Let us know where you're joining us from in the world. And don't forget to subscribe to become part of our growing community. Just a few weeks before that dreadful car ride, my life felt settled. Quiet, perhaps, since my dear Robert passed 5 years ago, but settled. My name is Evelyn Hayes. I am 72 years young, or so I like to think, living in the house Robert and I built together, filled with 50 years of memories. Mornings usually started with the sun streaming through the kitchen window, the scent of coffee brewing, maybe a quick glance at the newspaper. My highlight, though, was my garden. Robert always said I had a magic touch, especially with the hydrangeas. The blue hydrangeas, those big, cloud-like blooms, were his absolute favorite. Tending to them felt like keeping a piece of him alive. I managed my own affairs quite well, thank you very much. Paid my bills on time, kept the house tidy, maybe a little too tidy, Robert would have teased. I volunteered at the library twice a week and was an active member of the local gardening club. My mind was sharp. I enjoyed reading, doing the crossword puzzle, even navigating that confusing internet thing to look up new rose varieties. I was independent, and I cherished that independence fiercely. My only real fear, the one that sometimes whispered in the lonely hours of the night, was becoming a burden or ending up isolated, forgotten. My children, Mark and Sarah, were grown with lives of their own. Mark, nearing 50, worked in finance, always seemed busy, important. Sarah, a couple of years younger, was married with 2 teenage boys who rarely visited their grandmother anymore. I loved them, of course I did. A mother's love doesn't just switch off. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little hurt by how infrequent their calls and visits had become. Life gets busy, I told myself. They have their own families. Then about 2 months ago, things started to change. The phone calls became more frequent. Mark would ring up asking how I was managing, if the house felt too big. "Are you sure you are okay rattling around in there all alone, Mom?" he would ask, his voice laced with a concern that felt rehearsed. Sarah started dropping by more often, usually around lunchtime, bringing soup or muffins. "We just worry about you, Mom," she would say, fussing over imaginary dust on the mantelpiece. "Are you eating properly? Are you remembering to take your pills?" At first, I was genuinely touched. Maybe they finally realized their old mother needed a bit more attention. I savored the calls, looked forward to Sarah's visits. But then the questions started shifting. "Mom, have you thought about maybe downsizing?" Mark asked one Sunday afternoon. "Property taxes are so high, and managing the upkeep, it's a lot for you." Sarah chimed in. "We were looking at some lovely retirement communities nearby, Mom. Beautiful places, lots of activities, meals provided. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." A little alarm bell, faint but persistent, started ringing in the back of my mind. I loved my house. It was more than bricks and mortar. It was my sanctuary, filled with echoes of laughter, whispered secrets, the ghost of Robert's presence. Selling it felt like tearing out a part of my soul. And my finances? I had my pension, Robert's life insurance, and a decent nest egg we had carefully saved. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable. secure. Why the sudden obsession with my money, my house? One afternoon, while Sarah was visiting, Mark called her mobile. She stepped into the hallway to take it, but I overheard a snippet as I walked past to water my ferns. Mark's voice, low and urgent. Get the paperwork sorted. Needs to be the right time. Power of attorney. Power of attorney? Why would they need that? I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. I didn't mention it. I pretended I hadn't heard. But the seed of unease had been planted, and it was starting to sprout ugly little roots. Then came the day of the surprise. Mark and Sarah arrived together, beaming, holding a glossy brochure. "Mom, we have the most wonderful surprise for you," Sarah announced, her eyes sparkling a little too brightly. "A luxury spa vacation. Just what you need." Mark chimed in. "It is a top-notch place just outside the city. Massages, healthy meals, beautiful grounds, a whole week of pampering. You deserve it, Mom, for everything you have done for us." The brochure looked convincing. Pictures of serene women lounging by pools, elegant dining rooms, lush gardens. "A gift of wellness," the headline read. My initial suspicion warred with a longing to believe them, a desperate hope that this sudden generosity was genuine. Perhaps I had misjudged them. Perhaps they really did just want to treat their old mother. The thought of a week away, being looked after, no cooking, no cleaning, it was tempting, very tempting. After all the worry, maybe this was just what I needed. "Oh, children," I said, my voice thick with emotion. That is incredibly thoughtful. Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Mark boomed. "It is all booked. We will drive you there this Friday morning. Just pack a bag for a week, comfortable clothes, your swimsuit." Sarah hugged me tightly. "You are going to love it, Mom. Just relax and let us take care of everything." And so, I pushed down the lingering doubts. I packed my small suitcase, humming a little tune. I watered my hydrangeas one last time, promising them I would be back soon. I locked the front door, the familiar click echoing in the quiet street, unaware it would be the last time I did so for a very long time. The drive started pleasantly enough. Mark drove, Sarah sat beside me in the back, chattering about her boys, the weather, anything but the spa. I tried asking specific questions. What treatments were included? Was there a library? Their answers were vague. "Oh, they have everything, Mom," Mark said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You will see." Sarah kept patting my hand. "Just enjoy the scenery, Mom." The scenery started to change. Less suburban sprawl, more manicured hedges and imposing gates. We turned off the main highway onto a smaller, winding road. And then I saw it. A large wrought iron gate with elegantly scripted letters. "Golden Years Senior Living." My breath caught in my throat. "Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. This is not the spa from the brochure." Mark pulled the car to a smooth stop right in front of the main entrance, a large, institutional-looking brick building that screamed anything but luxury resort. He turned off the engine. "Mom," he said, his voice losing its cheerful edge, replaced by a firm, almost cold tone. "We need to talk. Sarah and we have been very worried about you, your memory. It is not what it used to be. You forget things. You get confused." "Confused?" I stammered, my heart pounding against my ribs. "I am not confused. What are you talking about?" Sarah opened her door and got out, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, please try to understand. This is for your own good. You need professional care, 24/7 supervision. We found the best place, Golden years is highly recommended. Supervision? I do not need supervision. Panic was rising, hot and suffocating. You tricked me. This is a nursing home. Mark got out and came around to my side, opening the door. Do not call it that, Mom. It is a senior living facility. Think of it as a long-term vacation. He reached for my arm. I flinched away. Two attendants in pale blue uniforms were suddenly there, smiling polite, empty smiles. Let go of me, I cried, trying to pull my arm back. Mark, Sarah, how could you? We love you, Mom, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. But her eyes were hard. This is the only way. They steered me out of the car. Mark reached into my purse, pulling out my wallet, my keys, my mobile phone. We will handle your finances from now on, Mom. Make sure your bills are paid. Manage your savings. It is too much for you to worry about. He pocketed everything. My keys. My connection to the outside world, my independence, gone. They guided me, half dragging my numb body towards the entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. I looked back, desperate, pleading. Mark and Sarah stood by the car, watching me being led away. They did not wave. They just watched. Then Mark got back into the driver's seat. The heavy doors of Golden Years slid shut behind me, the click echoing the finality of a prison gate. Locked inside, stripped of my belongings, my voice silenced by their lies. They thought they had won. They thought the frail old woman would just fade away in here. But they didn't know about Robert's favorite flower and the promise I made to myself months ago. They didn't know about Mr. Miller. The first few days passed in a blur of institutional beige and forced cheerfulness. My room was small, functional, sterile. It had a bed, a dresser, a small armchair by the window overlooking a patch of meticulously trimmed lawn. Nothing personal, nothing of mine except the clothes in my suitcase. They assigned me a care plan, which mostly involved scheduled meals in a large, noisy dining hall, mandatory activity time, bingo, sing-alongs with people who barely remembered the words, gentle stretching exercises, and regular checks by nurses who spoke to me in the overly loud, slow voice people reserve for toddlers or the profoundly deaf. I tried to explain. I spoke to the head nurse, a stern woman named Nurse Ratched. All right. Her name was actually Nurse Evans, but the comparison felt apt. I told her my children had tricked me, that I was perfectly capable of living alone, that this was all a terrible mistake. She listened with a practiced, sympathetic nod, took notes on a clipboard, and said, "It is common to feel a little disoriented at first, Evelyn. Your children signed all the necessary admission papers. They indicated you have been experiencing some memory lapses and confusion. They are just concerned for your safety." Confusion? The only confusion was why anyone would believe their lies. I asked to speak to the facility administrator, a Mr. Henderson. He repeated much the same thing, showing me the documents Mark and Sarah had signed, attesting to my cognitive decline and my voluntary admission. Voluntary? They had practically dragged me here. He assured me Golden Years was a supportive environment and that I would adjust in time. Adjust? Adjust to being a prisoner? Adjust to having my life stolen from me? Every polite smile, every patronizing reassurance felt like another bar added to my cage. I realized with dawning horror the trap they had sprung. Mark and Sarah had laid the groundwork perfectly, painting a picture of a frail, forgetful old woman who needed saving from herself. And the system, designed to protect, was now working against me, validating their narrative. I needed to contact the outside world. I needed to reach my lawyer, Mr. Miller. But how? My mobile phone was gone. I asked to use the phone in the residence lounge. It was a payphone, bolted to the wall. I fumbled in my pockets. No change. Mark had taken my wallet. Even if I had coins, I soon realized the calls were likely monitored. A staff member always seemed to be lingering nearby whenever a resident used it. What about mail? I asked for stationery at the front desk. They gave me a few sheets of paper and an envelope, but informed me that all outgoing mail was collected and posted by the office for convenience, which meant it would likely be screened. Sending a desperate plea for help that way seemed futile. It would probably never leave the building. Mark and Sarah visited twice that first week. They arrived bearing flowers, insultingly cheerful daisies, and a box of chocolates I didn't want. They sat in my sterile room, making small talk, asking if I was settling in. Settling in? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. You mean, am I getting used to being incarcerated? Mark sighed dramatically. Mom, please do not be difficult. We are doing what is best for you. Best for me or best for your wallets? The question hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Sarah started to cry, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. How can you say that, Mom? We love you. We just want you to be safe and looked after. Her tears felt as fake as her smile. I asked for my phone back, just to call Martha from the gardening club, I lied. Oh, Mom, you do not need to worry about that, Mark said smoothly. We let all your friends know you are taking an extended rest cure. They understand. Besides, the doctors here say limiting outside stimulation is better for your condition right now. My condition? My condition was that I had been kidnapped by my own flesh and blood. They stayed for exactly 45 minutes, then left, promising to return soon. Each visit left me feeling drained, angry, and increasingly desperate. They were controlling the narrative, controlling my access, controlling everything. Isolation began to press in. The other residents, well, some were truly frail, lost in the fog of dementia. Others seemed resigned, passive. I tried striking up conversations, hinting at my situation, but I was met with blank stares or nervous glances towards the staff. Maybe they were too afraid. Maybe they thought I really was confused. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of polite indifference and carefully managed routines. Days bled into weeks. The initial shock gave way to a dull, persistent ache of betrayal. I spent hours sitting by the window watching the groundskeepers tend the perfect, soulless flower beds. Nothing like my wild, joyful garden at home. I missed the feel of the soil, the scent of roses after rain, the cheerful blue faces of my hydrangeas. It was during these long, quiet hours that I started to notice her. Brenda. She was one of the younger care assistants, quieter than the others. She didn't use the overly cheerful voice. She moved efficiently, gently. And sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her eyes held a flicker of something. Sympathy? Understanding? One afternoon, she brought my medication. Instead of just placing it on the bedside table and leaving, she lingered for a moment. Those clouds look like they might bring rain, she said softly, glancing out the window. Good for the gardens, I suppose. Yes, I replied, looking at her properly for perhaps the first time. My hydrangeas always loved a good summer rain. A small smile touched her lips. You have hydrangeas? Oh, yes, I said, a genuine warmth spreading through me for the first time in weeks. Big blue ones. My husband, Robert, he adored them. Brenda nodded. They are lovely flowers. She paused, then quietly added, My grandmother grew them too. Just a small comment, a fleeting connection, but it felt like a lifeline. Maybe, just maybe. Not everyone here saw me as just a confused old lady. Maybe there was one person who might listen. Days turned into weeks. each sunrise mocking my captivity. Mark and Sarah's smiling faces were masks hiding their greed. Was there anyone in this place who saw the truth? Maybe Brenda. But trusting someone in this gilded cage felt like the biggest gamble of all. Sitting by that window, watching the unchanging landscape of golden years, my mind inevitably drifted backwards. Not just to Robert or the happy years, but to the creeping unease of the months before the spa vacation. It hadn't started suddenly. Like a slow-growing vine, the signs had wrapped around me gradually, almost unnoticed, until they were tight enough to choke. I remembered Mark visiting one evening, looking unusually stressed. He talked vaguely about a cash flow problem with his business, hinted that a small loan, maybe $20,000, would tide him over. I felt a pang of maternal concern, but also a flicker of caution. Mark lived well, fancy car, expensive holidays. Robert and I had always been frugal, saving carefully. I politely told him I couldn't help, that my savings were for my own future needs. He had looked displeased, a flicker of resentment in his eyes before he smoothed it over with a smile. "Of course, Mom, I understand," he had said, but the air felt colder afterwards. Then there was Sarah, during one of her lunchtime visits. She'd been talking about a friend whose elderly mother had sold her large family home and moved into a luxury assisted living apartment. "She is so much happier now, Mom," Sarah had emphasized. "No more worries about repairs or gardening. Everything is taken care of, and she unlocked all that equity from her house. She is traveling, enjoying life." She paused, looking around my living room. "This house holds so many memories, I know. But sometimes holding on to the past keeps us from embracing the future, don't you think?" The suggestion hung there, seemingly innocent, but it felt like she was probing, testing the waters. These incidents, dismissed at the time as fleeting worries or casual remarks, now clicked into place like pieces of a grim puzzle. The persistent questions about my finances, the suggestions about selling the house, Mark's overheard phone call about paperwork and power of attorney. It wasn't sudden concern for my well-being. It was a calculated plan. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about my money. The realization sent a fresh wave of cold dread through me, but also anger. A slow, burning anger that started to melt the edges of my despair. How dare they? After everything Robert and I had done for them. It was that growing unease, that gut feeling that something wasn't right, that had prompted my secret visit to Mr. David Miller about 3 months before they sprang their trap. Mr. Miller had been our family lawyer for years, handling our wills after Robert passed. He was a kind, meticulous man, silver-haired, with sharp eyes behind spectacles. I hadn't told Mark or Sarah I was going. I took a taxi to his downtown office, feeling slightly clandestine. "Evelyn," he greeted me warmly, shaking my hand. "Good to see you. Is everything all right?" I sat down, twisting my gloves in my lap. "David," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I need your advice. It is about planning for the future. Just precautions, you understand." I told him about Mark and Sarah's sudden attentiveness, their questions about my finances and the house, the vague feeling of being pressured. I didn't outright accuse them. It felt too monstrous then. But I laid out my anxieties. Mr. Miller listened patiently, making occasional notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Evelyn," he said gently, "your concerns are unfortunately not uncommon. Financial exploitation of elders is a serious issue. It is wise to be prepared." He explained the concept of a durable power of attorney. It allows you to appoint someone, an agent, to manage your financial and legal affairs if you become unable to do so yourself, he clarified. The durable part means it remains valid even if you are later deemed incapacitated. Many people appoint their children, but you can appoint anyone you trust implicitly. My heart beat a little faster. Can I appoint you, David? He looked thoughtful for a moment. It is possible, Evelyn, though it's a significant responsibility. We would need to clearly define the scope and conditions, but yes, if that is your wish and you feel you cannot fully trust anyone else with this power right now, I would be willing to act as your agent. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought tears. Yes, David, that is what I want. We spent the next hour drafting the document, making sure it was ironclad. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Then Mr. Miller leaned forward. Evelyn, let's consider a worst-case scenario. What if someone tries to isolate you, perhaps claims you are incompetent, prevents you from contacting me directly? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, prophetic in its accuracy. What can I do then? We need a way for you to signal duress, a code word that only you and I know, something innocuous, something personal, that wouldn't raise suspicion if overheard or seen in writing. I thought for a moment. What was precious to me? Something Mark and Sarah barely noticed. My garden. Robert's favorite. Blue hydrangea, I said softly. My husband loved them. They are special. Mr. Miller wrote it down carefully in my file. Blue hydrangea. Excellent. If I receive this phrase from you or from someone credibly acting on your behalf, I will understand. It means you are in trouble and need immediate intervention. I will use the power of attorney to protect your interests without delay. He patted my hand. Let's hope you never need it, Evelyn. But it is better to have a lifeboat and not need it than to need one and not have it. Leaving his office that day, I had felt empowered, safer. I had a secret weapon. Now, trapped in golden years, that memory became my anchor. Blue hydrangea. The words echoed in my mind, a tiny spark of defiance against the overwhelming darkness. The opportunity, or what felt like one, came during Mark and Sarah's next visit. They arrived armed not with flowers this time, but with a thick sheaf of papers and grim determination. Sarah stayed by the door, looking anxious, while Mark sat down opposite me, placing the documents firmly on the small table between us. Mom, he began, his voice devoid of warmth, we need your signature on these. I eyed the papers warily. What are they? Just some standard forms for your care here, he said dismissively, and authorization for us to manage your accounts properly, paying the golden years fees, handling your investments. It will make things much simpler. He pushed a pen towards me. I looked at the top sheet. Dense legal language swam before my eyes, but I caught phrases like financial management, transfer of assets, agent authorization. They weren't just trying to pay my bills. They were trying to gain full legal control over everything I owned. The memory of Mr. Miller's warning, the power of the durable power of attorney I had already signed, giving him authority, strengthened my resolve. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Mark's eyes narrowed. No? What do you mean, no? I mean, I am not signing anything until my lawyer has reviewed it. Lawyer? Mark scoffed, leaning forward. Mom, you do not need a lawyer for this. We are your children. We are just trying to help you. His voice rose, impatience flashing across his face. Nevertheless, I insisted, folding my hands in my lap, meeting his gaze directly. I want Mr. David Miller to look these over first. Mark slammed his hand flat on the table, making the papers jump. Do not be ridiculous, Mother. You are confused. You do not know what is best for you. Just sign the damn papers. Sarah gasped from the doorway. Mark, please. Stay out of this, Sarah, he snapped, his face flushed with anger. Then he turned back to me, his voice dangerously soft. Sign them, Mom, or we will have to explore other options. Options that prove you are no longer competent to make these decisions yourself. The threat hung heavy in the air, but I didn't flinch. The anger inside me burned away the fear. Seeing his mask slip, the raw greed underneath, solidified my purpose. My answer is no, Mark. Not without Mr. Miller. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he abruptly gathered the papers, stood up, and stormed out of the room without another word. Sarah hesitated, gave me a wide-eyed, fearful look, then hurried after him. The door closed, leaving me shaken but resolute. They had shown their hand. Refusing to sign was a small victory, a temporary reprieve, but I knew it wouldn't last. They would find another way. Mark's threat about proving me incompetent echoed ominously. Time was running out. I had to get the message to Mr. Miller. I had to find a way to whisper the words, blue hydrangea. My hope now rested entirely on reaching Brenda, on gambling that the quiet care assistant with the kind eyes might be willing to help. Now, more than ever, I needed to reach Mr. Miller. My hope rested on a kind face and a shared whisper about blue flowers. My small act of defiance in refusing to sign their papers bought me time, but I knew it was measured in hours, not days. Mark's threat about proving me incompetent felt chillingly real. I had to act, and Brenda felt like my only potential ally in this fortress of feigned kindness. Approaching her required careful calculation. I couldn't seem too desperate, too eager, lest I frighten her off or raise suspicion among the other staff. I started small. Whenever Brenda was assigned to my room, I would make a point of asking about her day, sharing a trivial observation about the weather, or mentioning my garden. I learned she lived with her mother, working double shifts to make ends meet. I saw the weariness in her eyes, but also a fundamental decency. One afternoon, she was changing the water in the vase of wilting daisies Mark and Sarah had left on a previous visit. "They do not last long indoors, do they?" I commented idly. Brenda sighed. "Not like things grown outside." "No," I agreed. "My blue hydrangeas now. They would bloom for weeks right on the bush. Such a vibrant blue." I watched her face carefully. A nostalgic softness flickered in her eyes. "My Nana's were almost purple," she said quietly. "Used to put aluminum sulfate in the soil," she said. "My Robert always handled the soil amendments," I replied, letting a touch of sadness enter my voice. "He had the real green thumb." We talked for a few more minutes about gardening, about her grandmother, about simple things. It felt like building a fragile bridge, one careful plank at a time. The next day, I saw my chance. Brenda came in during a quieter period, after lunch, to check my blood pressure. The hallway outside was momentarily empty. Taking a deep breath, I lowered my voice. "Brenda," I whispered urgently, "I need your help. It is desperately important." She froze, her eyes widening slightly with alarm. "Mrs. Hayes, I cannot—" "Please," I interrupted softly but intensely. "My children, they tricked me. They put me here to get my money. I am not confused, Brenda, I swear to you. I am trapped. There is someone I need to contact, my lawyer. If I can just get a message to him, he can help me. He knows the truth." I saw the conflict warring in her expression. Fear of losing her job versus the dawning realization that I might be telling the truth. What do you want me to do?" she whispered back, glancing nervously towards the door. "Just a small note," I pleaded. "His name and address. And a message, just 2 words. Can you take it? Mail it for me? Please, Brenda, I have no one else." She hesitated, biting her lip. "It is risky, Mrs. Hayes. They watch us. If I get caught—" "I know," I said, reaching out and briefly touching her hand. "But imagine if it were your Nana." That seemed to strike a chord. She looked down, then met my eyes with a flicker of resolve. "Okay," she breathed. "Quickly. What is it?" My heart leaped. Later that evening, my hands trembling slightly, I scribbled the vital information on a corner torn from a paper napkin. Mr. David Miller, his office address, and beneath it, the crucial code, blue hydrangea. I folded it into a tiny square, clutching it tightly in my palm, waiting for Brenda's shift. Meanwhile, the pressure from Mark and Sarah intensified, just as I feared. Nurse Evans started asking me more pointed questions about dates, names, recent events, clearly testing my memory under instructions. There were hushed conversations among the staff whenever I walked past. I overheard Mr. Henderson, the administrator on the phone, mentioning my name and the phrase competency evaluation. They were moving forward with their plan to have me declared legally unfit. The walls felt like they were closing in. Brenda finally arrived with the evening medication trolley. It was busier now. Other residents were in the hallway. Another nurse, a stern-looking woman I didn't like named Nurse Davis, was nearby charting. Brenda approached my bedside, her face carefully neutral. As she handed me the small paper cup with my pills, I tried to subtly press the folded napkin into her palm. "What is this?" Nurse Davis's sharp voice cut through the air. She had seen the exchange. Brenda jumped, snatching her hand back as if burned. The tiny napkin fluttered to the floor. Nurse Davis stalked over, her shoes clicking ominously on the linoleum. She bent down and picked it up before either of us could react. "Passing notes, are we, Mrs. Hayes? What secrets are we sharing, Brenda?" Her eyes scanned the crumpled paper. She read the name, the address, the 2 words. Her expression didn't change, but her lips tightened. Without a word, she crumpled the napkin into a tight ball and tossed it into the waste bin beside my bed. "Brenda," Nurse Davis said, her voice dangerously calm, "report to my office immediately, and Mrs. Hayes—" She turned her cold gaze on me. "This kind of behavior is disruptive and inappropriate. It seems Mr. Hayes and Mrs. Jenkins were right about your confusion causing problems." As she turned and marched away, Brenda trailing miserably behind her, casting one desperate, apologetic glance back at me. That was it. My one chance destroyed. Brenda would surely lose her job, or at least be moved where she couldn't help me. The message was gone, lying uselessly in the trash. A wave of absolute despair washed over me, so profound it felt physical, a crushing weight on my chest. They had anticipated everything. They had won. The next morning, I was informed I was being moved to a different room, in a quieter wing. "For your own peace of mind," Nurse Evans told me, but I knew it was for increased isolation. My new room was even smaller, the window overlooking a dull brick wall and a small, neglected patch of ground. That afternoon, the phone in my room rang. It was Mark. "Mom," he said, his voice brisk, businesslike. "Just wanted to let you know we have accepted an offer on the house. Excellent price. The closing should be in about 6 weeks. We will handle all the paperwork, of course. It is a relief, isn't it? One less thing for you to worry about." My house. Sold. Just like that. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. Tears welled up, hot and stinging. I sank onto the narrow bed, the receiver slipping from my numb fingers, clattering onto the floor. It was over. They had taken my home, my freedom, my money. There was nothing left. I curled up on the bed, the institutional blanket rough against my cheek, and wept. Wept for Robert, for my lost life, for the children who had become monsters. Hours later, the shadows lengthened in the small room. The despair was a heavy cloak. I felt empty, hollowed out. Was this how it ended? Fading away in this sterile box, forgotten while my children spent the inheritance Robert and I had worked our whole lives for. The thought was unbearable. My gaze drifted listlessly towards the window, and then I saw it. Pushing up through the neglected soil near the brick wall, almost hidden, was a small, struggling bush, and on it one defiant cluster of blooms, a pale, watery blue. A hydrangea. It wasn't the vibrant, confident blue of my own bushes, but it was unmistakably a hydrangea. Seeing it there, surviving against the odds in this forgotten corner, sparked something deep inside me. A flicker of defiance. Robert's voice echoed in my memory from a time I had felt overwhelmed by some long-forgotten worry. Even in the darkest night, there are still stars, Evie. You just have to lift your head and look for them. And then, another memory surfaced. Faint at first, then sharpening into focus. A few days before Brenda's failed attempt, before the crackdown intensified, I had felt a surge of loneliness and mailed a postcard. It was to my old friend Martha from the gardening club. Her birthday wasn't for another month, but I'd pretended to get the dates mixed up just for an excuse to reach out, to feel a connection to my old life. I'd written some innocuous lines about missing our chats, hoping she was well. But then, desperate to leave some clue, any clue, I had added a line at the bottom, something I hoped sounded merely nostalgic. Thinking of my lovely garden, I'd written, especially remembering those beautiful blue hydrangeas this time of year, hoping Mr. Miller can help sort out the garden trust paperwork soon. At the time, it felt like a ridiculously long shot, dropping his name and the flower name together, hoping he would somehow see it and understand. The mail was supposedly screened, after all, but Brenda was gone. The note was destroyed. Mark was closing in on my home. Was it over? Or had that simple postcard, sent days ago with a desperate hidden plea, somehow slipped through the cracks? Had my tiny, almost accidental flare found its way through the suffocating darkness? All I could do now was wait. Wait for a miracle. Or for Mr. Miller. Meanwhile, miles away in his quiet downtown office, David Miller sorted through his morning mail. Bills, legal journals, routine correspondence. A colorful postcard caught his eye. A picture of kittens playing with yarn. He turned it over. It was from Evelyn Hayes, addressed from Golden Years Senior Living. He frowned slightly. He knew Mark and Sarah had told him Evelyn was taking an extended rest, but Golden Years sounded more permanent. He read the cheerful, slightly rambling message about missing garden club chats, wishing Martha a happy early birthday. Standard enough. He almost put it aside. But then his eyes snagged on the last sentence. Thinking of my lovely garden, especially remembering those beautiful blue hydrangeas this time of year, hoping Mr. Miller can help sort out the garden trust paperwork soon. Blue hydrangeas. Mr. Miller. The words resonated, triggering a clear memory of Evelyn sitting in his office just months before, her voice earnest, choosing those specific words as her signal of distress. Blue hydrangea. It wasn't just a nostalgic comment. It was the code word. Evelyn was signaling him. She was trapped. Mr. Miller felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with cold anger. He immediately pulled Evelyn's file, his fingers finding the durable power of attorney she had signed, appointing him as her agent. He reread the notes from their meeting, her anxieties about her children, the setup of the code word. It all clicked into place. Mark and Sarah hadn't just encouraged her to rest. They had incarcerated her and were likely trying to seize control of her assets. The mention of garden trust paperwork was a clever misdirection. There was no such trust. It was purely to get his name and the code onto the card. He didn't waste a second. He picked up the phone and called his colleague, Eleanor Vance, a sharp lawyer specializing in elder law and financial abuse litigation. He quickly explained the situation, the code word, the DPOA. "Eleanor," he said, his voice tight with urgency, "I think Evelyn Hayes has been fraudulently committed and is being isolated while her children attempt to liquidate her assets. I need to get her out, and I need to freeze everything they might be touching." Eleanor listened intently. "Send me copies of everything, David," she said briskly. "The DPOA is key. We can move fast on this. Let's hit them hard and legally." While Eleanor began drafting emergency petitions to freeze accounts and challenge any actions taken by Mark and Sarah, Mr. Miller prepared himself. He gathered copies of the DPOA, notes from his meetings with Evelyn, even printouts of old emails Evelyn had sent him demonstrating her lucidity just months prior. He tucked everything into his briefcase. It was time to pay a visit to Golden Years Senior Living. He arrived at the facility late that morning, his expression calm but resolute. He walked purposefully to the front desk. "I am David Miller," he announced clearly. "I am here to see my client, Mrs. Evelyn Hayes. Please inform her I am here and take me to her immediately." The receptionist, a young woman with overly bright lipstick, gave him a practiced, dismissive smile. "I am sorry, sir, but Mrs. Hayes is resting. Visiting hours are not until this afternoon, and all visits must be prearranged with her family." Mr. Miller held her gaze. "I am not family. I am her legal counsel and her designated agent under a durable power of attorney, executed when she was clearly competent. I do not need her children's permission. You will take me to her now, or I will call the police and report an unlawful detainment." He placed a copy of the DPOA cover sheet firmly on the counter. The receptionist's smile faltered. She stammered, picked up the phone, and made a panicked call. Minutes later, Mr. Henderson, the administrator, hurried out, looking flustered. "Mr. Miller, there seems to be some misunderstanding. Mrs. Hayes' children handle all her affairs. She is unwell." "Mr. Henderson." Mr. Miller's voice was dangerously quiet. "My client, Mrs. Evelyn Hayes, appointed me as her agent, not her children. I have irrefutable proof she was competent when she did so. I also have reason to believe she is being held here against her will under fraudulent pretenses, while her assets are being misappropriated. Now, for the last time, take me to my client." He didn't raise his voice, but the steely determination in his eyes was unmistakable. Henderson paled visibly. The threat of legal action, especially involving fraudulent commitment and financial abuse, was clearly terrifying. "Of course, Mr. Miller, right this way." He led the way down the corridor towards the quiet wing. As they walked, Mr. Miller calmly instructed Henderson to contact Mark Hayes and Sarah Jenkins and tell them to come to the facility immediately for an urgent meeting regarding their mother's care plan and financial arrangements. Henderson, now thoroughly intimidated, quickly complied. When they reached my room, Henderson knocked tentatively. "Mrs. Hayes, you have a visitor. Mr. Miller?" My heart leaped into my throat. Miller? He came? The postcard worked? Henderson opened the door. There stood David Miller, calm and solid, his briefcase in hand. Seeing him felt like seeing the cavalry arrive. Tears of relief sprang to my eyes. "David!" I gasped, struggling to sit up straighter. "Evelyn," he said, his voice filled with gentle reassurance as he stepped inside, Henderson hovering awkwardly in the doorway. "It is good to see you. Are you all right?" "I am now," I whispered, gripping his offered hand tightly. Just then, Mark and Sarah arrived, hurrying down the hall, looking annoyed and slightly apprehensive. "Mr. Henderson, what is so urgent?" Mark demanded, then stopped short as he saw Mr. Miller standing in my room. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mark, Sarah," Mr. Miller greeted them coolly. "Perhaps we should all convene in a meeting room. There are some serious matters we need to discuss regarding your mother's situation and her estate." The confrontation took place in a sterile conference room down the hall. Me, seated beside Mr. Miller, feeling stronger by the second. Mark and Sarah opposite us, their initial bluster quickly fading into visible panic. Mr. Henderson and Nurse Evans stood nervously by the wall, clearly sensing the shift in power. Mr. Miller laid it out calmly, methodically. He presented the durable power of attorney, dated 3 months prior, clearly naming him as my agent. He presented copies of my letters and emails demonstrating my lucidity at that time. He stated he had received a clear signal of duress from me. He didn't specify how, protecting the postcard method. He informed them he had already instructed my bank, through the power of attorney, to freeze all accounts and halt any transactions initiated by Mark or Sarah, including the pending sale of my house. Mark turned purple. "This is outrageous! She is incompetent! We have documents! We are her children!" "Your documents," Mr. Miller countered smoothly, "were signed under duress or based on fraudulent claims about your mother's condition. My authority legally supersedes any subsequent documents you may have coerced her into signing or signed yourselves claiming agency you did not possess. And as for competence," he turned to me, "Evelyn, do you wish to be here?" "No," I said, my voice ringing clear and strong in the suddenly silent room. "I want to go home. They lied to me. They took my keys, my phone, my money. They put me here against my will." Sarah burst into tears. "We were just trying to help." "Help yourselves, you mean?" Mr. Miller stated coldly. He then outlined the potential legal consequences they now faced: fraud, conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, financial elder abuse. "I strongly advise you both to seek legal counsel immediately," he concluded. Just as Mark opened his mouth to argue further, there was a soft knock. The door opened slightly, and Brenda peered in, looking nervous but determined. "Excuse me, Mr. Miller," she said hesitantly. I heard what was happening. I need to say something." All eyes turned to her. "A few days ago," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "Mistress Hayes tried to give me a note for you. It had your name and address. Nurse Davis saw us, took the note, and threw it away. She reprimanded me later. Mistresses Hayes was trying to reach you. She is not confused." Brenda's unexpected testimony was the final nail in the coffin of Mark and Sarah's lies. Nurse Evans looked horrified. Henderson buried his face in his hands. Mark and Sarah simply stared, defeated. "Thank you, Brenda," Mr. Miller said quietly, making a note. He then turned back to Henderson. "My client will be leaving with me immediately. Please arrange for her personal belongings to be packed." Minutes later, I walked out of the front doors of Golden Years Senior Living, leaning lightly on David Miller's arm. I paused on the top step, breathing in the free air, the scent of cut grass and exhaust fumes suddenly smelling sweeter than any perfume. It wasn't just air, it was liberty. Mark and Sarah remained behind in the conference room, their faces pale with shock and the dawning realization of the trouble they were in. I didn't look back. Mr. Miller handled everything in the following weeks. The sale of my house was immediately canceled. He worked with Eleanor Vance to ensure all my accounts were secured, tracing and recovering the funds Mark had already managed to siphon off. He filed formal complaints against Golden Years for their negligence and complicity, resulting in an internal investigation and, I later heard, Mr. Henderson's quiet resignation. Mark and Sarah, facing potential criminal charges and lawsuits, were forced to agree to a settlement where they repaid every penny they had taken or spent and signed legal documents agreeing to have no further contact with me or control over my affairs. Their reputations in their social circles, I imagine, were ruined. It wasn't jail time, perhaps, but it was a public disgrace and financial ruin, a fitting consequence delivered by the quiet power of the law. Mr. Miller also made sure Brenda wasn't unfairly penalized. In fact, he helped her find a better paying position at a reputable home care agency, writing her a glowing recommendation. As for me, I couldn't bear to return to my house. The memories of Robert were precious, but the violation by Mark and Sarah had tainted it. It felt like a crime scene. With Mr. Miller's help, I sold it. On my own terms this time. I bought a lovely, light-filled condominium in a different part of town, one with a large balcony perfect for container gardening. The first thing I planted out there was a row of blue hydrangeas. Healing wasn't instantaneous. The betrayal cut deep, a wound that would likely always leave a scar. Rebuilding trust, even in casual acquaintances, took time. I reconnected with Martha and my other true friends from the garden club, who were horrified when they learned the truth behind my extended rest cure. Their support was a balm to my soul. I didn't seek revenge beyond the legal restitution. Seeing my children brought low wasn't the goal. Reclaiming my life, my dignity, my independence, that was the victory. I severed all ties. No more phone calls, no birthday cards, no financial support. They had made their choice. Now they had to live with it. And I had to live with mine. My new life is quieter, simpler, but it is mine. I volunteer at a local senior center now, listening to others, sharing my story when appropriate, quietly warning people about the importance of planning, of choosing their power of attorney wisely, of recognizing the subtle signs of manipulation, even from loved ones. Sometimes, sitting on my balcony in the morning sun, coffee in hand, looking at my thriving blue hydrangeas, I feel a pang of sadness for the family I lost. But then I feel the warmth of the sun on my face, the gentle breeze, the solid presence of the railing under my hand. I am safe. I am free. They tried to bury me, forgetting I was a seed. And like the blue hydrangeas I love, I bloomed again, stronger and brighter in my own sunlight. Thank you for walking this journey with me today. It means the world to have you listen. If Evelyn's story resonated with you, please give this video a like, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss our next story. Click here to watch another video from our channel. Until next time, take care and remember your own strength.